Once again, Matt Painter and Rick Barnes are competing for the top recruits in 2026.
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your host. I am Nick Arvin, and we have a fun basketball episode coming your way today because Purdue and Tennessee, they're competing on the recruiting trail, and it's starting to get hot. Today's episode is brought to you guys by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So, like I said, Purdue, Tennessee, these two programs are competing, and this is nothing new. These two programs have been competing since the beginning of the recruiting cycle. This 2026 class is very pivotal, and both Rick Barnes, both Matt Painter, they have had their eyes on very similar players. And we saw that kind of with Jacob Weber at the start of this recruiting cycle. Jacob Weber was a guy that Tennessee wanted, and Purdue also really wanted. When you think about Rick Barnes, when you think about that Tennessee program, not to the level Matt Painter's been able to do it, but they've kind of had a similar approach. We talked yesterday about how Kentucky and Purdue, they have very different approaches when it comes to one and done guys. When it comes to Purdue being a program that they want to get guys that are going to be program recruits, that are going to develop under Matt Painter, that are going to be here for 2-3 years and are really going to succeed. We see that with the roster that Purdue has now. So when you talk about the recruits, when you talk about 2026, which is in full swing right now, Jacob Weber was that guy. That's a guy that both Tennessee, both Rick Barnes and Matt Painter, they view Jacob Weber as a foundational piece, a guy who can shoot the ball, a movement shooter, who can really shoot it from anywhere. For Purdue, when you think about Fletcher Lawyer, this is a guy who's not going to be here next year, who isn't going to be here going forward. Jacob Weber, he provides the perfect opportunity to kind of move on from Fletcher Lawyer. Not that you want to move on from him, but he's kind of a foundational piece, a transitional guy that can fit in and be a great shooter for the next 3-4 years at Purdue. That's what Jacob Weber is. And Matt Painter and the Purdue Boilermakers, they were able to beat out Tennessee for Weber, and they were really able to get that commitment, which was super huge because Tennessee, they were going after Weber hard. So Purdue, they bring him on a visit. They're able to secure him not too long after. And Jacob Weber becomes the second recruit in what's starting to build up to be one of Purdue's best classes of all time. But you only have two guys right now, the way that it's shaping up. You're thinking that you're probably going to be at about 4 guys. By the time that Purdue gets all their commits in 2026, you have a decent class that you need to get filled up because you do have a lot of guys graduating, a lot of guys moving on from the program after this year. So you need a decent sized class. You have 2 guys in Luke Erdl, Jacob Weber now. And Purdue, they have set their sights on a few guys, and 2 of those guys, Purdue and Tennessee, are competing for. Rick Barnes and Matt Painter are competing, and Purdue, they had a guy on a visit this past weekend. Tennessee has been all over him. Texas A&M have been making a strong push for him. But right now, Rivals, the expert at One Sports Network, they have Purdue as the favorites for Ralph Scott. And there have been a lot of rumorings because Ralph Scott, it seems like he may be favoring Purdue. There's some speculation about when he may commit, whether Purdue may be his choice. But when we talk about it, we talk about the percentages that are on One Network. Right now, Purdue is at 36.4%. Tennessee close behind at 31.9%. And Texas A&M at 27.3%. So right now, Ralph Scott, this is a guy that Purdue and Tennessee are competing really hard for. And Tennessee desperately wants to get Ralph Scott. Purdue desperately wants to get Ralph Scott as well, because when you think about Scott, when you think about who he is, 6'8", this guy's listed as a small forward, but could easily develop physically into a guy that can play the small forward, but can also move up to a power forward type of guy. He is not a one-dimensional player. He's able to get it done at the rim. He's developing a three-point shot, and he's the perfect player for what Purdue needs. When you think about Luke Girdle, the point guard of the future for Purdue, the number one state player in the state of Indiana. When you think about Jacob Weber at the 2 spot, a guy who can shoot the 3, I see that Ralph Scott is the perfect guy to fit alongside this 2026 class. He has all the pieces from my perspective, and that's why Tennessee wants this guy so bad. But the visit went well. He's from IMG Academy. So, as you know, one of the most prestigious schools, one of the most prestigious academies when you talk about high school, these kids developing. Ralph Scott has been in a system where he is looking to improve. He is looking to get better, and he has done just that. This is a guy that for Purdue fans, you need to look out for, because the tension between him and Purdue, it sounds like it's getting hot right now. I think that Purdue, they are the front runners for this guy over Tennessee. And the reason I think that is because Purdue and Tennessee are competing for another guy, and that guy is Bo Ogden. While I think that Ralph Scott is the candidate that should be number one for Purdue right now on their big board, should be number one in terms of guys that Matt Painter should be recruiting, because I think he fits in the best. They also like a guy in Bo Ogden. Bo Ogden, Purdue got in on pretty early, and he just canceled his visit to Virginia. Virginia was in the top 3 for Bo Ogden. So right now, down to 2 teams, Tennessee and Purdue. Once again, Purdue and Tennessee competing for guys. Bo Ogden is a shooting guard, 6'5", 180 pounds, out of the Austin, Texas area. And this is a guy much like the previous guys we talked about in this class. All great shooters. Jacob Weber, Ralph Scott. These are all guys that are going to be able to shoot the ball, that are going to be able to develop from the offensive side of the ball, and are pieces that can really develop defensively going forward. And that's kind of what have made these guys so attractive to both Rick Barnes and to Matt Painter. These are 2 guys that are Tennessee players, that are Purdue players. They fit the system. They fit what these 2 programs are going to want to do. So from a Bo Ogden perspective, this has been a guy that there's been a lot of speculation about him in terms of whether Purdue is going to get him, whether Texas or not. Texas, that was a program that was in from Austin. That was a connection. But that relationship is kind of simmered down. And like I said, it's really down to Tennessee and Purdue right now. This is a guy that is very similar to Jacob Weber. When you think about all these guys, all 3, Jacob Weber, Ralph Scott, and Bo Ogden, I believe Ralph Scott is listed as a small forward, on some sites a shooting guard, but Bo Ogden listed as a shooting guard, Jacob Weber listed as a shooting guard. And I think that Bo Ogden, he plays a lot like Jacob Weber. So when you think about Purdue was able to get that Weber commitment, I think that kind of cooled off the chemistry between Bo Ogden and the Boilermakers a little bit. So very similar percentages, but just in a different way. Tennessee right now at 36.7%. The front runners for Bo Ogden, and Purdue at 32.1% for Bo Ogden. So right now, Purdue the favorites over Tennessee for Ralph Scott, and Tennessee the favorites over Purdue for Bo Ogden. And honestly, I see this is how it's probably going to play out. I think that Bo Ogden is too similar of a player to Jacob Weber for him to really make sense in that 2026 class. If he commits, great. If he doesn't, you have Jacob Weber. But I think that Ralph Scott is a guy that you absolutely want to get. And there are the rumblings. There is the speculation that he may be a Boilermaker soon. But I think that he fits this class. 6'8", small forward. He can play the power forward as he grows. This is a guy you fit along a 1 and a 2 of the future, and Weber and Ertl. This guy could be elite. So the way I see this playing out is that with Jacob Weber committing to Purdue, Bo Ogden has more opportunity at Tennessee. He realizes that. I don't know if Bo Ogden or Ralph Scott will commit first, but if Bo Ogden commits first to Tennessee, I think it makes things easier for Ralph Scott to get to Purdue. I think that if Bo Ogden does end up committing to Tennessee, Ralph Scott will make it to Purdue. Say Ralph Scott commits first, it could be 50-50, anyone's ball game. But Purdue has done a good job at beating Tennessee, whether that be in the Music City Bowl, Sweet 16, volleyball. We saw that Instagram post, Twitter post from the Purdue social media, and it's happening again because Rick Barnes, Matt Painter, they're competing. I think that Ralph Scott is soon to be a Boilermaker, but we'll see. It's going down to the wire. Huge competition on the recruiting trail. Stay tuned. We're going to have more updates on these guys. Hopefully we get a Purdue commit soon. But right now, a guy who's already on the roster, some analysts are saying he's due for a breakout year. That guy being CJ Cox. We'll talk about him here. Stay with us. We'll have that here next. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from metallic accents to available Nappa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. They do the heavy lifting. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Monarch has really worked out for me managing my subscriptions. With them, I've really been able to limit that and spend less money. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. John Rothstein of college basketball on CBS. Great at what he does, a great analyst of the game of college basketball. He put out a list today. He put out a list of 20 players, the breakout players in college basketball, players that he expects to have breakout years. And when you think about Purdue players, you may think about an Omir Meyer. You may think about different guys that are due for a breakout year. And he did put one Boilermaker on the list. He did put one guy that I want to talk about today. And that guy is CJ Cox. Now, CJ Cox is a guy that he was a starter last year at times. He was one of the 4 returning starters this year for Purdue. And he's a guy that his starting role has been debated, whether he's going to start this year, whether Jakari Harris may plug into that 3 spot, whether Fletcher Lawyer may move over to the 3 and Cox, he'll start at the 2. These are conversations that have been had, but Rothstein, he says, CJ Cox is ready for the moment. He's ready for a breakout year right now. And I have to say that I agree with him. I've been a big advocate of Jakari Harris, that I think that Harris is going to have a great year. I think that there is opportunity for him to start at the 3 spot. I think he brings a bit of a bigger body to this team. But when you think about CJ Cox, you absolutely can't go wrong with this guy. This is a guy that he has the opportunity to make plays alongside Braden Smith. We saw that last year. We'll see it again. We saw he had that huge game against Nebraska, that stretch against Alabama where I think 9 points in a row. Just CJ Cox, he was great at times last year, but he just needed to search for consistency on the defensive side of the ball. Absolutely elite. One of the best point of attack defenders, perimeter defenders that you're going to see in the nation. That's what CJ Cox gives to you. He gives you the playmaking ability to really be an elite guy. I think he had decent splits last year, about 6 points. So not the best from a production standpoint, but he gives you what you need. You have Braden Smith. You have Trey Coffin-Wren. These are guys that are going to be able to produce from a points perspective. When you think about what you need from this year for CJ Cox. So you don't need a ton of points, but you need him to be a solid playmaker, be a good defender alongside Braden Smith. That's what I want to see from him this year. And I do believe that he has the ability to be a breakout guy, but not necessarily from the stereotypical perspective. I don't see him being this huge point scorer. In fact, I don't know if I see him being a top 5-point scorer on the team, but I see him being a glue guy who, when you need a stop, he gives you a stop. A guy in CJ Cox who you can pair up against the opposing team's top offensive player. There's been a lot of talk about Auburn. Bruce Pearl, he retires, and Purdue, they're going to have to face off against that Auburn team in Indianapolis. That's going to be a huge game. You got to face off against Kentucky. When you think about what those teams have, Otega Owe for Kentucky, you're going to face off against him in that exhibition. Tahad Pettiford against Auburn in that game in Indianapolis. You're going to want CJ Cox on those guys because CJ Cox is a gamer. He's battle tested. And overall, this is just a guy that, like I said, he's not going to woo you on the stat sheet, but what he's going to do is he's going to make the plays when he needs to make the plays that are going to win Purdue games. So I don't know if I agree with Rothstein's take that he's going to be a breakout player, because I think that he's already broken out from a perspective of he provides everything that Purdue needs him to provide. I don't see this guy breaking out and becoming an All-American, but I see him breaking out and becoming one of the best defenders in the league. I think that he can be one of the most important players for Purdue this year. I think that he can be one of the most underrated players this year in terms of what he offers to the Boilermakers. I just think it's kind of difficult to say that this guy is going to be the biggest breakout player when you already have so much talent on this team, so many mouths to feed. I don't know if CJ Cox is going to necessarily be a top 3, top 4 option when you think about we need a guy to get us a bucket. I think that he's going to develop as a 3-point shooter. I think that if you need him to get you a bucket, he's going to get you a bucket. But Purdue doesn't need him to really produce offensively like that. He's not going to be that guy, but what he is going to provide is going to be pretty substantial for Purdue this year. And there's a lot of talk about CJ Cox paired alongside Fletcher Lawyer, paired alongside Braden Smith in that starting lineup. And while that's fine, I want to see a lineup with this guy and Meyer. I think that giving Omir Meyer the opportunity to really score at will, like we know he's capable of, to have the ball in his hand, shoot threes. That guy is absolutely explosive. And I'm not saying that CJ Cox isn't, but I think that what we're going to see this year is that Meyer is really going to be able to get out of his shell. And I think we'll see him with Smith. I think we'll see him with Lawyer as well. But I think he's really going to be able to get out of his shell alongside CJ Cox, because I think that CJ Cox is the perfect guard to play alongside in the backcourt. A guy that kind of takes the pressure off you. A young guy like Meyer, who's ultra talented, just hasn't played a lot of college basketball games. He's played in the Euro League, hasn't played college basketball. I think that giving this guy the opportunity to play pressure-free basketball, to get out of the shell, I think that that's something that CJ Cox offers. This is a guy that is very matured, and that's a perspective that you develop when you play under Matt Painter. CJ Cox has played under Matt Painter. He's played pivotal minutes. He played in March Madness. He played all throughout the regular season. And this is just another piece on Purdue's roster that when you think about, I'm sure another program would have paid CJ Cox so much more money to be a starting point guard, starting combo guard somewhere. But he elected to stay in his role, continue to develop under Matt Painter, and he's going to be one of the most important pieces on what's due to be a potential national championship contending roster. CJ Cox isn't going to be a guy that's going to woo you, isn't going to be the flashiest guy from a box score perspective. So I don't know if I can say that he's going to be the biggest breakout player for Purdue. I'm a fan of John Rothstein. I'm a fan of what he does. I don't think it's a bad take, but I think that the way that people view CJ Cox is just very underrated from a perspective of what he actually brings to the team. I think he's more important than any amount of numbers could possibly show. I think he's the perfect guard to pair up in this roster, and I think that the opportunities for Cox are endless. I can't wait to see him this year, and I expect for CJ Cox to be one of the most underrated players and one of the best glue guys in the nation. We'll talk more CJ Cox. We'll talk the bracketology. Second, Joe Lunardi bracketology release. It released today. We'll talk Purdue matchup, where they're at, what region. It's going to be huge. We'll talk about bracketology. Stick with us. We got it here next. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because I can bet however I want, whether I want to jump in live on the action. Maybe I want to make a parlay, same-game parlay, futures bet. It really doesn't matter because FanDuel has all the options. They have all the ways to bet. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. We're 30 days away from Purdue, Kentucky at Rupp Arena in that huge exhibition match. And one of my favorite guys in college basketball media, Joe Lunardi, he released his second edition of preseason bracketology, and I want to go over it today before we end out today's show. See where Purdue's at, see where Joe Lunardi, one of the most trusted voices in college basketball, has Purdue from a preseason perspective. So going into this, the top overall seed isn't Purdue. That's a spot where I see Purdue definitely battling to get this year. I think that top overall seed is going to be very important in this year's tournament. Right now, Lunardi has Houston, the Cougars, who eliminated Purdue last year in the Sweet 16 behind Kelvin Sampson. That's going to be a very good coach team. That's going to be a very talented team. The Cougars beat Purdue last year. I don't think Houston is going to be any worse this year. I think they're going to be a very good squad this year. But honestly, I think that Lunardi is kind of discrediting where Purdue's going to be at. I think they're out of conference schedule. It gives Purdue the opportunity to really stack up quad one wins early. And I think that that's going to favor Purdue going into March. So right now, Houston, the Cougars are the top overall seed, but no, Purdue, they still come in as a number one overall seed. However, that is in the West region. In San Jose, their first section is in St. Louis, the first couple rounds. Purdue, Norfolk State, the 1 versus 16 matchup. And then Cincinnati, Ole Miss, that's the 8-9. So some interesting matchups right there. We know Ole Miss with Chris Beer. That's an SEC program that's going to be pretty consistent. Cincinnati, still some question marks, but that game can change. That could be absolutely anything. But what we take away is Purdue is a preseason number one overall seed, which a lot of people expect, a lot of people do agree with. But it's good to see Joe Lunardi, like I said, one of the most trusted voices, him say that. But when you talk about how important that first region is to have the number one region, I think that the West region is much more difficult than the Midwest region that Houston is in. And that's why I say that one overall seed, although everyone's a one seed, it's so much more important because you do have a little bit of an easier matchup. Houston, they play UConn as the number 2 seed, Tennessee, the 3 seed, Illinois, the 4 seed. Purdue, they have BYU as the 2 seed. Kentucky is the 3 seed. Arkansas as the 4 seed. Obviously, that's a little bit debatable because UConn's going to be a very good basketball team this year. Tennessee is going to be a very good basketball team. Illinois, some questions, but Brad Underwood looking to turn that back into a great basketball team. So I may have misspoken. I may have underestimated the teams in that Midwest division, but I do think that BYU under AJ DeBonsta, that's going to be a team that when you bring in the number one overall guy with that freshman, we saw it last year with Cooper Flagg, there can be mixed results. That either really succeeds, that guy can bring you to a Final Four, that can be the ceiling of your program, or sometimes he's just not that good. He can't carry a program. It really is just dependent on circumstance. BYU in an interesting spot. DeBonsta going to be one of the most talented, one of the most looked at college basketball players in the nation. That's an interesting region, mate. The number 2 seed that Purdue, in theory, would have to share in this scenario. Kentucky, the number 3. This is one that I've talked about. I think that Kentucky-Purdue has the opportunity to be a Final Four matchup. I think that we're going to see that in October. I think we could see that down the line in March, even going into April. But in this scenario, Kentucky, they're in the same region as Purdue. That would make Kentucky that Elite Eight matchup, if possible. If Kentucky makes it that far, assuming Purdue makes it that far, it would make Kentucky-Purdue an Elite Eight matchup. And that's one that I really want to see in March. That's one that I would be super excited to see. And then Michigan State, 6th seed in this region. We're going to face off against Michigan State in conference play at Mackey down the stretch. We're going to catch Michigan State a couple times before, in this theoretical scenario, you maybe have them in the same region. And then Arkansas, John Calipari, and Louisville, Pat Kelsey. Those are 2 teams with 2 coaches that have a lot of history, 2 coaches that are really trying to build these programs up. John Calipari, he goes to Arkansas, brings some guys over from Kentucky, has really had to build that program up, has faced some adversity, but overall, Arkansas, they upset St. John's last year in March Madness. So, a John Calipari team, you can never really count him out. And same with Pat Kelsey. He's really trying to build an identity for that Cardinals team. And that's going to be a team that really has a solid backcourt this year. That's going to be one of their strengths. And when you look at this region, there are plenty of teams that have the opportunity to compete with Purdue. I'm not saying that any of these teams are going to beat Purdue, but a lot of times we talk about how March Madness, it really is a lot of luck that goes into it. Purdue, we have these championship expectations this year. This is the year where everyone's saying it's championship or bust. Purdue, they're the favorites on most of the betting sites, on our partners at FanDuel. It's a situation where, although Purdue is a huge favorite, although Purdue, they have the talent on paper, when you face off against teams in a region like Louisville, Arkansas, Kentucky, even BYU, you never know what's going to happen. So that's why it's so important that Purdue battles for the best possible seeding they possibly can going into the tournament. Try to win out your conference tournament. Try to really win in the regular season. I don't think that trying to motivate the Boilermakers to win is going to be something that Purdue really struggles with a whole lot. There are some tough stretches. There's one on the West Coast. There's one at home. You face several tough games. There's a lot that could go different ways this year for Purdue. But ultimately, I feel like if they're able to stick with what they know, if we know the Boilermakers, they have that depth. They have that mental power where they don't get deterred. When you think about them doing Navy SEAL training, this is going to be a team that is very mentally tough. And all that is going to play out going into March. March Madness is about what team can compete the longest. It's going to be about what team can put their head down and compete when adversity faces your way, because you're going to face off against hungry teams in March. That's the nature. That's what Joe Lunardi predicts. And that's just the realism of what college basketball is, what the tournament is. But for Purdue, you have more talent. You have the mentality. You have the opportunity to have one of the best regular seasons in school history, and you have the opportunity to get it done in March. So Purdue, they're very high ranked already in the preseason as they continue to string wins together, as they have quad one opportunities. Marquette, Iowa State, Auburn, all those games are going to be quad one opportunities. Purdue really has an opportunity to build up a resume early, build up a resume for potentially to get that number one overall seed, to definitely get a number one seed in the tournament, because it's going to be so important in a year where college basketball, the scene is as deep as it is. There are multiple teams that with national championship aspirations this year. The league is extremely deep, but Purdue, they have the most talent. We're going to keep up with it. We're going to keep up with Joe Lunardi's bracketology, because it really gives us a great perspective on where the analysts, where the guys at ESPN, where the guys that get paid a ton of money to do this have Purdue ranked. It's a great benchmark for where this team's going into the season. So I love to see it. Fun little thing, fun little exercise. Tennessee, rather, competing with Purdue for some of these top recruits. Ralph Scott is a name to look out for. Bo Ogden, Also in Purdue's site, CJ Cox, analysts think that he's due for a breakout year. We'll have to see about that. And in Bracketology, the second one released from Joe Lunardi, Purdue in a good spot. Thank you guys for joining us today on Locked On Boilermakers. It's always a pleasure. If you guys are seeing us for the first time, make sure to like, subscribe, comment. It helps us out a ton to bring you guys daily content. Thank you guys for joining us, and it's always an exciting moment for Locked On. Locked On and Fire TV, they present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12, he leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year, Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Hawley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. Thank you guys, and as always, boiler up, hammer down.